Okay, having made all those important announcements, we're now ready to turn to the text. Don't forget, these are the things that I told you. Okay, now we're going to go on to Building, Dwelling, and Thinking, which is written 2 years after the essay on the thing, and in some ways, I think, has gotten better about certain issues. But in general, I must say I was disappointed rereading it today. I was hoping to get more support out of it for the view I think it holds than I can. So I'm going to have to put a rather heavy interpretation on it to make it interesting. And I'm not sure whether it supports it or not. But at least we can start as a kind of review of the fourfold, to just getting clearer about the fourfold, because it seems to me that Heidegger's gotten a lot clearer about the fourfold. So let's start on 150 with the mortals. They're always so hard. Now, it looks a little more like what I wanted to say on the second paragraph on 150. Okay, the mortals are the human beings. That's fine. They're called mortals because they can die. Well, we don't know what that means yet. That means to be capable of death as death. Well, now comes the part that I said, but wasn't very clear in thinking. But that's got, I would say, to put it extremely, nothing to do with what happens to people on their deathbed when they're croaking. I said that, but it didn't have much text to back it up. I just said that's how it was in Being in Time. But it's even clearer here than in Being in Time when he says only man dies, and indeed continually. Well, you've got to ask yourself, what in the world can that be? It doesn't mean that you're just getting old and gradually shriveling up and will eventually come to an end. It means that there's something that you do all the time as a mortal, and either you hide it or you are in touch with it. But as long as he remains on earth, under the sky, before the divinities, that is, while he's doing that, man is dying. It has nothing to do, he says at the top of 151, nor does it mean to darken dwelling by blindly staring towards the end. It has nothing to do with the end, I don't think. The end is something in the future, and dying is whatever it is happening right now. And so, what is it then? Well, he doesn't give you much help. But at least there's no more talk about being and nothing, which is Being in Time talk that was there in the thinking. So what is it? Well, all I can think of is it's a way of living such that you have an identity which you are always ready to give up for another identity. Certainly, if you're going to let yourself be pulled into various worlds in which you will have different identities. Remember, my mother, who is also a jet pilot, is going to have very different identities in the different worlds where things are thinking. And that means you would hold on to each of these identities while you were in them in a different way. You would hold on to them as something you appreciate and brought out in its ownness, not by holding on to it and making it as stable as possible, and in Kierkegaardian terms, defining yourself in terms of it and having it eternally, the way Kierkegaard talks about your identity. But it would be you would have your identity and bring it out in the full awareness that it's only one identity that you have among others, and that there will be times when it is appropriate to have it and other times when it's appropriate not to have it. And that is to say, you are not going to be an autonomous subject who has one identity and character a la Kant, and you're not going to be a resource either, which has no identities at all, but which is just a flexible something or other. You're going to be this poly kind of person, which is what human beings are really, I think Heidegger's holding at this point, whether they know it or not. They are, as mortals, capable of having different identities in different worlds, and that's what it is to be a mortal. Or at least that's my story about it. If anybody has a better story about it, I'm certainly open to hearing it. The fourfold thing is so hard to make sense out of it without either turning it into something else or make sense out of it simply by repeating Heidegger's words. it's a real challenge for exegetical struggle. But so that's it. Now, on the divinities, I also think he's made progress. And what's wrong, I mean, I gather from Liz that people didn't buy my story that the divinities were the other, what I was thinking of calling endangered species of practices that are around. Endangered because technology is in the process of trying to make them all efficient and rational, and will do it, whereas we want to keep poesis and physis practices and Christian practices, so we have to cultivate these endangered species of practices. And I said that when they were working in a particular case of things thinging, they were the divinities. And I had text to back it up, remember, the text from the letter to the student, what is left still, how does it up the sacred or something that's still around and still in our world. Where's the student thing? Again, at the end of the thing thinking, isn't it? I mean, I quoted, and I don't think I was wrong, I just think there's a missing piece in it. I had two stories. Here's a way to put this, which will be illuminating, I hope. I had two different stories about the divinity. One was that they were these endangered species of practices that were around, and the other was that they were that to which we were grateful when we said, when the dinner really worked, or when the thing really thung, or whatever. And now I think that those two things are really the same. That is, it's to these. And remember, I said what we were grateful for is that it wasn't something that we were in control of, whether the dinner worked, but it either took off and worked or it didn't, and then if it did, we were grateful. Well, now I want to put this together and say that the divinities are these other possible practices which enable us to have identities and enable things to think, and for which we are grateful because it's up to them whether we get called into some world that works or not. Now, the new element is this being called into. The divinity, we have to get in tune with the divinities, in sync with the divinities. That is, to take my example, when you're playing with your kid, you could be called by the poesis divinities to get in sync with and in tune with your nurturing role. You could also sort of impose on the kid the efficiency story that is around. But it seems to me that wouldn't be appropriate, although maybe in sometimes when you're playing with your kid it would be appropriate. Then you'd be called by those, beckoned by that divinity. I'm making a big fuss about the top of 150. The divinities are the beckoning messengers of the Godhead. Beckoning, that is, the divinities are what calls us to get, and we have to get in tune with or in sync with, to bring out this everything in its own most in a particular case of things thing. So I'm trying to pull together the gratitude receptivity story and the remaining skills from other understandings of being story and put them both together. Remember, and I have a sentence at least that supports this. I just want to remind you on 184. I think it's very important, this little passage I've got, where he says the default of God and the divinities is absence, but absence is not nothing. It's precisely the presence which must first be appropriated of the hidden fullness and wealth of what has been and what is thus gathered, and what thus gathering is presencing of the divine in the world of the Greeks, prophetic Judaism, the preaching of Jesus, and so forth. That is, those must be those other styles of understandings of being, and he does think of them as the divinities. And I think they beckon us, and we either get in tune with them or fail to get in tune with them. That's my new story. Let's see. So we have to be receptive to them. And if we are, and I'll come back to this, not only do we bring things out in their own most, but we get out of this hassled unrest situation that we are in. He mentions this that phrase. I'll come back to that phrase. But I think part of our gratitude is that everything is being brought out in its own mode. The child, or at the dinner, the guests, each in their own way. And also that we're feeling centered. That's this focal practice thing. Instead of feeling hassled, we're at peace. We'll hear more about that in a minute. And for all that, we're grateful. And I wrote down here, and we can even get in tune with the technological practices. Why do I say that? There's the hassling stuff. But let me see. What I say is, I want to read the one before last paragraph on 150. Mortals dwell in that they receive the sky, the sun, the earth, the stars, and so forth. They do not turn night into day, nor into harassed unrest. Now, that's a funny. I don't understand. That's true, all right. Why I'm citing it right here and the way I am, I'm not sure. But what I've written here, never mind what everything I do want to say, but I say we'll come back to it when I do it right. That you're one of the things you're grateful for is this peace, this center, this being centered and not hassled. And I also want to say, before I leave the divinities, that I agree with Forrest now about the divinities on the highway bridge that they're never completely gone. He talks about how they can be absent, but they can only be absent in the sense that we are not being sensitive to them. We're not being attuned to them. Not that they're not there to be attuned to. I think that's right. That's got to do with how I was reading, and it's partly the fault of the translation, which at the top of 153, when we're talking about the highway bridge, the bridge gathers as a passage that crosses before the divinities, whether we explicitly think of and visibly give thanks for their presence as in the figure of the saint on the bridge, or whether that divine presence is obstructed or even pushed. The holy is not in the German. That just makes it more extreme. It's simply pushed aside. Pushed aside isn't gotten rid of. It's just hidden. It's not. It's other things are getting in the way of it. But we can, and I guess maybe that's the next point I should turn to. Let's see if I do. Well, I will, but it's a long point. We can get in tune with the divinities. You want to say something? Yeah.
Well, okay, with the bridge, if the divinities of the old modes of revealing, or practices from the old modes of revealing, what would that mean for the bridge? Exactly?
For the current bridge, which bridge? The highway bridge. Oh, it wouldn't. But a good question, because it shows that I haven't been clear. Now, it would turn out that at each bridge had its own modes of revealing. I have to sort of bear down a bit on all these other bridges, but if you beat on them enough, you can make them look like a Christian bridge, a subject-object bridge, a poesis bridge, and a technology bridge. He's got these four different bridges here. So the technology bridge, the only gods around would be the flexibility practices. And now the challenge, you're the perfect straight man for this. That's exactly what I was going to take up next. What would it be like to be beckoned into and get in sync with the divinities that are around for highway bridges, which have been hidden from everybody but Heidegger, presumably, but which are there? And if I'm right, that would have to mean to be beckoned, that is, to be drawn to get in tune in a positive way with the flexibility of the bridge. And now comes the hard part to swallow, but I think I can defend it. And to make yourself into a flexible resource. But I say right now, but I'll come back to it, but not to make yourself into a flexible resource in general and always, but to have the possibility of that too. It's only if you think that you are a flexible resource, then you've lost your mortalness. Then you've lost the fact that that's just one of your possibilities and one of your identities. But once you see that you can also be a nurturer and also be a subject-object dominator, you can then let yourself fully be, and I'll try to give you a description for fun, of what it would be to be a happy resource on an Autobahn highway. That's the line I want to take. Let me develop that step by step. But what would it be like to preserve and promote a style of challenging forth, opposed to nurturing, it seems? How could you, so to speak, cultivate the highway bridge? It seems like a contradiction. And in a certain way, it is. I mean, if you think it's not going to look like cultivating your child. It has no identity, if this story is right, no stable purpose. It's that way. It's not like the Brooklyn Bridge, which has a very serious job getting people from Manhattan to Brooklyn. I mean, I'm thinking of an Autobahn bridge, sort of, as I say, in the middle of nowhere with lots of interchanges that go to lots of different places, and it's not in the particular subject-object job of satisfying a particular desire to get to some particular place in a stable way. It satisfies. It's flexible. You can go to Lake Como, or you can go to Hamburg, or you can go to Berlin. And all the signs tell you which of the turnoffs in the exchange you can take. So what is it to cultivate this with no stable purpose? And what is it for us to become resources with a different sort of identity by getting in sync with it? It won't, for instance, be gathering. It will be dispersing, because that's what it should be doing in its flexibleness. It can't exactly be bringing things into their own. I'm trying to make the case as hard as I can, because insofar as we're in the modern flexibility, postmodern flexibility mode that we are in, the technicity mode, things don't have some essence to be brought out into their own. So what's going on there? Well, first, I mean, now there are lots of things affixing. I mean, this is the problem that he's posing. And I got another problem which you haven't posed me, but I posed myself for the first time this morning with a shock. Namely, I never realized that the Borgmann can, though very helpful, get in the way of something I want to say right now. It looks like there must be two kinds of technological something or others. I don't have any name for both of them. Technological entities. There's technological devices. Now, technological devices are very interesting, and Borgmann has a great story about them. But you can't get into tune with them. There's no question about it. They're just not in the getting in tune with business. And you can see it if you take the heating story. I mean, as the central heating system gets more and more completely invisible, and the thermostat's doing its job, and there isn't even any hot air vent, it's the radiant heating is in the floor, and now you've just got the commodity, namely your room stays exactly the same temperature, winter and summer, and night and day, if you want it that way, and so forth. Once you've got that, there's nothing like getting in tune with it. It's become invisible. Devices just become invisible. So now comes a new question I never thought about before. Is the only kind of technological entities devices? And the answer seems to be no. I mean, if something like the Autobahn exchange is going to be a technological something, it's going to be a technological thingy. It doesn't, I mean, it can disappear too, but in a different sort of way. It disappears in the sense that we'll talk about, and did already, when it becomes so customary that you can, so to speak, be in sync with it without even paying any attention. But it doesn't even make any sense to say you're in sync with the central heating system without paying any attention. It isn't as if you developed a skill for doing the heating system thing so well that now you can do it without paying any attention to it. Maybe in the old days they had that with the fireplace. I mean, having got up every day, chopped the wood, lit the fire, you might be able to do the foyer in a way that was completely gewohnt. That is, completely habitual, completely invisible, but nonetheless drawing on all this skill and drawing the fourfold. Well, that's not how the central heating system works, I think. So now I'm just going to have to introduce a new distinction that isn't in Heidegger, but then he never had the Borgmann story about devices, which I like. But there seem to be technological entities which are just in the process of disappearing, which require no skill to use them and never from beginning to end, did you ever have to pay any attention to them? You could have been born and died without even knowing there was a central heating system. And people will, probably, pretty soon, be just like that. And then there are technological things, of which the Autobahn bridge is an example. But there must be lots of other examples, too. I think computers must be an example. It takes a lot of skill to use a computer, though you can get so you can use it transparently when you're word processing. But it isn't as if the computer is ever going to disappear in the way that somehow the word processing just takes care of itself. You're going to have to do it. Okay, now having got all that together, what's my picture of what happens on the bridge? Okay, the technological thing, let's take the Autobahn bridge, will draw you in as a mortal. That means you won't become just a resource. It means that you won't have to treat yourself as a resource all the time and treat everything in the flexible, efficient mode. So if that's true, it might be then, I think, safe to be a resource if that's what's called for. So now it looks like on the bridge what's called for is letting yourself resonate to the technological style as opposed to the other styles. And that means you get in sync with its flexibility. You just of all the various gods, you are beckoned by that one. And what would that look like? Well, it looks like I'm sort of able to. I have this example from Charles Spinoza. You're driving on the Autobahn bridge, and you think you're heading toward Mannheim or something, and then you get a call on your cell phone, and everybody's in a conference call, and they say, on a day like this, wouldn't it be better to meet in Lake Como? And so you instead of taking this on-ramp, you take that off-ramp, you take that off-ramp. That's getting in sync with the amazing flexibility that the highway system is offering you. And you can be grateful for that, and you can do that. And just to make it even further, and suppose there's a traffic jam. Or I want to say, and you can do it in a way that you're not being frantic and hassled. I mean, there's a way to do it in a way that is sort of letting it push you around, and in which you are, say, for instance, mixing up two styles. So that what you really want to do is, your desire is to get from here to there as quickly as possible. If that's what you want, then you're in a subject-object mode, and you're going to be very annoyed if there's a traffic jam. But if you are really sort of in the right laid-back relation to technicity, what you do, this is again, Charles Spinoza is my techno man, so I go to him to find out what it's like. He says, well, if there's a traffic jam, then you take out your cell phone and you talk to people, and you turn on your Carfax, and you get your latest information that you need, and you listen to your tape deck, which is teaching you some language, so you'll be more efficient, and so forth. And that's all, and you can do all that without being hassled. And you can still be, in a funny way, at peace in the middle of all of this, and centered in the middle of all of this. Well, this is a weird story. I don't know whether Heidegger wants us to believe this story or not. Forrest looks like he doesn't believe this story.
I know, that's true. But one of the problems I find originally with this is some slippage in the metaphor.
Okay.
When you use the word bridge here, it's got to be a comparable bridge, i.e. this is not an interchange. The Germans would certainly have a different word for this interchange kind of thing. And it's certainly not the whole Autobahn system. Now, if he said the whole Autobahn system, that's clearly immensely flexible.
He says an Autobahn bridge in the German, right? Can you look it up?
It is
right.
an Autobahn bridge,
right.
But that bridge is just going to, it's going to be a hill here, and you're going to go from one side of the hill to the other with this little valley in between. This isn't the interchange. And Hofstadter, again, is melodramatic, like with your whole here, because the German could just as easily be translated something like this, designed for the fastest possible long-distance traffic. Which,
right.
No, I understand.
Well, isn't that what it said?
No,
I can't remember.
Something much more melodramatic.
But it's still technological, isn't it?
It is still, it's still modern bridge.
Right, okay, well, that's all.
Technology.
Okay.
But
there's no network of long distance, network?
There's a network.
Okay, I like the network,
And
okay.
No, I knew you would.
All right.
But it's the bridge. It's just this bridge, like any other bridge.
But tied into the network. I mean, that's not an accident. I mean, it's not a bridge between this city and that city.
No, I know, but it's still just this bridge. It's not the interchange.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I build my interchange in by tied into the network. What do you think, John? You look like you have an opinion. What's at stake? Oh, well, Forrest...
Yeah.
Okay, well, if Forrest's story makes it... I couldn't distinguish it from a subject-object bridge if we take Forrest's story. It just is the most sort of direct way to get from here to there and satisfy my desire when I'm here to get to there.
Yeah.
And so, but I wanted to say it's important it's tied into the network. That's why I can go to Como or Mannheim or Berlin or anywhere. It's not an interchange, granted, but I think Heidegger wants it to be like an interchange. I didn't put the network in there. Okay, John?
Keep following up. So if it's not a bridge that's part of ethnicity, then what part of the argument that you've made doesn't work?
Well, if it was a bridge that was like subject-object, it just would be, I'd have to have another example. There would be nothing wrong with it, except that I wouldn't be getting into it by using the technicity gods or skills. I would be using my subject-object gods or skills, trying to get from here to there as directly as possible to satisfy my desire to get there. Whereas I want to be flexible resource that can go anywhere on a highway that can take me anywhere. That's what would be to get in tune with the technicity gods.
And so is there, of course, an important reason why a technicity bridge couldn't be thinging?
Oh, we want it to be thinking. Both of us do that.
Both of us do, yeah.
So
Oh, good.
dispute is just over whether...
Right. It's a question of whether it's thinking in a subject-object mode or good. I'm glad you asked. Yeah, I'm trying to say that even technological things can think. I keep stressing this because nobody else in the history of reading this book has ever noticed the highway bridge, and I didn't notice it for years. I mean, when something doesn't seem to belong there, you can have an amazing capacity for not seeing it. But Heidegger's obviously hitting you in the face with the technicity of this bridge, maximum yield.
Well, that's not what it says. That's the problem.
Oh, no maximum yield.
No.
What does it say?
It just says designed for the fastest possible long-distance traffic. That's why this is such a melodramatic statement, like the whole was elsewhere. I mean, it's still modern. Don't misunderstand.
Yeah, okay. Still postmodern, you mean? But anyway, just by our jargon. But okay. Well, anyway.
Insofar as it gathers, it doesn't matter if it's technological.
Right.
Otherwise,
Right.
it'll still be a thing.
That's right. So it's doing its kind of gathering, but it's a very peculiar kind of gathering, a kind of dispersing kind of gathering. I say that it's a very interesting puzzle. And your way of cultivating it, see, it's all puzzlingly contradictory and fun in a way. I mean, its way of gathering is certainly a dispersion. I mean, that's the business of you can go anywhere. It's flexible. It's not like the dinner, pulling everybody in and fixing them for a while anyway in a certain role and giving them a closed world. It's sort of an opening up kind of world. And secondly, your way of cultivating it isn't bringing out its essence in the normal sense of essence, because in the normal sense of essence it hasn't got any. It's not the bridge to go to Berlin or the bridge to go to Como. Its essence is to be able to be whatever you efficiently have it doing. And so, but nonetheless, you can cultivate that. That's what I think. You can cultivate it as a thing as long as you're immortal. Meaning, and the question, remember, I ask is, but if you cultivate it in its dispersion and in its lack of having an essence and in your lack of having an identity, haven't you just become a resource? And the answer is you would have, if it wasn't that, as a mortal, you understand that you have other skills to be beckoned by other divinities in other situations. That's the punchline. That's what saves you and makes you able to have a relation of cultivating and gratitude even to the technological mode of being. And that was the challenge. How would you do that? I think now there are two levels for doing it. Just to connect with my previous lecture, I said one is, well, you've got to cultivate the skills for flexibility, and that's right. But I didn't have any ontic story. Now I want to say, and here's what it looks like to cultivate the skill of flexibility in a particular case, where a particular things, and you help it, cultivate it, preserve it. And now, John.
And I assume that to cultivate a thing within technicity is already to be on the way to a pre-relation technology.
Absolutely. Not only on the way. Yes. Good. Yeah, I need help as much as I can get, and you're helping. Yes, all of this is in the mode of saying, and this is what it is to have a free relation to technology. That's the only way to have a free relation to technology is not just to recognize it as a mode of givenness. That's too abstract. That's what I said last time. And one wonders, and what would it be like to do that? To just sit there and be receptive to the technological understanding of being. And you've got to do it ontically. You've got to do it really today at 5 o'clock. And I'm trying to tell you what that would look like. Yeah.
Just one last deemer on this kind of thing. When he talks about the river bridge there, near the country town, brings wagons and horses to surrounding villages, i.e., you go over this bridge, and then it says, well, this is the road to Le Mans, this is the road to Marseille, this is the road to wherever. I mean, it's identical so far as I can gather.
Well, that's a challenge. Let me think. What do I think about that?
You know, maybe the prices are better in Limoges than in Marseille today, so let's, you know, the messenger comes by and says, so you take this road instead of that road. I just don't see the difference.
And if there's no difference with the...
Well, that he just can't use this as an example for what he wants to say about the technicity. That's the only thing he's stated.
Yes, well, I would sort of make it work as well as I can, and I'm trying to think to the surrounding villages.
Yeah,
that's a start toward technicity, I admit, but it's a big difference from that yet, and I don't think we're disagreeing, to the Autobahn network that can get you to any town as efficiently as possible anywhere. I mean, you get a few villages here, and I see the problem. I mean, it would be more if it was like the Brooklyn Bridge. I would like it better where it only went to Brooklyn, but I'm not concerned with so much with worrying about the details of the passage. I want to make it I want to use it to try to tell you a story about the phenomena that makes Heidegger very interesting and very unnostalgic. Much better than Borgmann. I've written a paper about this, which I gave in front of Borgmann at Missoula about 2 years ago, called Feasts and Highway Bridges. And I think, whereas Borgmann, remember, thinks that he thinks the funny. I'm doing a kind of, this is just a parenthetical. I mean, Borgmann is kind of down on Heidegger, although he's Heideggerian through and through. He says, but there is this aura of nostalgia that clings to Heidegger because he only believes that old-fashioned things are how does he put it, are conthing, and then Borgmann says, I'm more modern. I think the technological stuff is good as long as it serves focal practices, like good running shoes for running. And I presume dishwashers could help the celebratory meal, and so forth. And I want to say, well, that's nice, Borgmann. You're right. I mean, there's certainly true that technology can serve things of other sorts, but Heidegger's way ahead of you. He thinks that there can be technological things thinking, and that we can, and gods, and that we can get in touch with them. Something just off the chart. And Borgmann, listen to me, not at all happy about this. He doesn't buy it. But in any case, it's an interesting proposal. Now, well, anyway, we've already had the discussion that goes with maybe, but if other people want to say anything, that's the end of my story on on the bridge business. I should put a copy of my paper, I will remember, of Feasts and Highway Bridges, where I explain in a lot of detail what I just did in the lecture in a condensed way, how Heidegger's Highway Bridge and Borgmann's Feast are related to, and why I think Heidegger's less nostalgic than Borgmann. Okay, and no more questions about that? Yeah. Yeah, right, my feeling is you feel just, if you do it right, you just feel happy being able to do this, to switch the lanes, to be so fast, to be so efficient, I love it sometimes, and when I'm on the highway like that, and I don't want to think that I've become a resource. I want to think that it's wonderful that there are such things. It's interesting what Borgman says about the highway system. He wrote an article on it. I don't think he was aware of how he was relating to the bridge story. He thinks the highway system is really bad because it avoids all the towns. And it was important to go into the towns and meet the people and see the local stuff. I mean, that's again a subject-object sort of thing. To be a tourist is not what we're talking about here. To be a tourist, in Borgman's sense, I guess it isn't even tourist. Heidegger wouldn't like tourists, and neither would Borgman. But to be able to enter into to some extent, these various towns, and he complains in the end of how now they can go very fast from Missoula to so-and-so, and they never have to go near this town they used to stop and eat in, and so forth. And he thinks the highway system is not a nice thing. He says about it that's fascinating. It's the only thing besides the Great Wall of China that you can see from the moon is the American highway system, he said. And he sees it as one great big entity, which is a great big technological entity, and he doesn't like it. Okay, anything else?
A lot of this, of course, is going to depend on the extent to which you understand what the divinities might be in this case. So,
your
interpretation as to what that is.
Right.
And
well,
if divinities are practices,
right,
then that is something that could be gathered in it, i.e., technological practices.
Right.
But if divinities weren't practices, then this whole story would not work.
Well, there got to be a kind of style of practices, right? Because at least that's the only way I could make sense of what it would be like for the highway bridge to thing and for us to cultivate it. That's why that passage is so important to me again. He doesn't call them practices. I'm trying to look what he says again. The divinities are not nothing but the hidden fullness and wealth of what has been, and what thus gathered is presencing of the divine from these various worlds. And so I just want to say, how could this divine from these various worlds be around yet, but in these marginal and endangered species of practices? And then there will be the efficiency practices, which are around too.
These worlds did have divinities.
Yes, okay.
And indeed, those divinities are no longer, and they are no longer in the sense of absence, because for Heidegger, the gods are absent. And their absence is a kind of presence, but I just don't see why
right.
you have to refer to practice.
It's a hidden fullness, and it can be appropriated, and it's still gathering and presencing. But you're right, it was the divine in those worlds. So you have to ask, well, what is it now? And then you're right, I'm extrapolating and saying, well, whatever, for instance, in the subject-object world, there were also practices that allowed things to presence as objects, and these are all modes of givenness. And the divinities are supposed to be there but hidden in the highway bridge, so we better figure out what they could be, and that's my guess. Yeah?
Someone else asked in the discussion how does this not become Earth? How does these old practices...
They are like Earth. In that one aspect of Earth where Earth is a reservoir of other possible future and already past marginal practices, a kind of fullness, a hidden fullness.
So there's just a crossover between all...
Well, that's good. I find only the funny way you put your question, as if somehow that would be bad news if it was Earth. You might want to say, how is the Earth going to be there in the highway bridge story? I see. How can it be the divinities and the Earth? That's what you're asking. It's got to do one job or the other. Interesting. I got to think about that.
How are they distinct?
Right. How are they distinct?
Have Earth,
okay. Why aren't the divinities just the Earth? The hidden fullness. Okay, here's my answer, which is that, and it's just perfect for getting back to where we started, it's the beckoning aspect of it that's the divinities. That is, there is the hidden fullness, but that it calls you to be attuned to it. That isn't in the Earth. The Earth is either just sitting there or even more trying to be hidden and withdrawing and being secluded. But then there's some other function here that we are being called to get in sync with these divinities, whatever they are. That's the other element. Yeah?
Well, the divinities aren't hidden. The
No.
divinities are flown, absent.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They're still around, and when we hear flown and absent, I mean, I constantly wanting to fill in some phenomena, then I say marginal. But then he says, but the earth was supposed to be the marginal, and I say yes, and now I've got a story. The marginal as beckoning us to get back in attunement with it, then it's divinities. Okay, yeah, B.
What page was that quote you just read?
The one I keep reading, it's the letter to the student on page 184, tacked on at the end of the thing essay. It's the first full paragraph. On 184, the default of God and the divinities is absent. Is not like that for you?
What's that?
You look like it isn't on your book. In your book.
I have it.
Oh, okay.
I want to read it again. I'm just confused. What the divinities are leftover practices. Why does he call them divinities?
Well, I mean, that's a good. Okay. Well, what are you going to call divinities? You've got to be careful. You don't want something onto-theological to be divinities. Let me just tell you that what he says the divinities are in the Parmenides lectures, where he does the Homeric gods and says, in effect, I'm the only one who has an ontology and a phenomenology that can make sense of the Homeric gods. What were they? And then he says, they are the attuning ones. They are that which pulls you into attunement with various situations. And then he does his Aphrodite story that I was spelling out, and Hermes, and, well, Ares, and so forth. So, insofar as you need a story about the divinities, and you can't just have, I mean, it's a big puzzle, what are the divinities? And how are they still here, and somehow gathered and presencing and absent and all that? So I've got a story. But it's God only knows what Heidegger has in mind. Maybe we'll find out. We're going to read about the last God in this thing I'm going to pass out to you, but I wouldn't have much hope for it. It is, boy, is it obscure. Okay, I'm going to go on because I have to finish. It's only because I want to make sure that I finish today what I have to do, because we're going to go on to language for sure next time. So, and we can come back. In fact, I have a subject for interesting discussion if we get to the end. But let me see now. We want to say that the things give us a directive. They have an authority. We're called to conform to them. This is still part of the beckoning business, and we get in tune with it. However we get in tune with things, whichever kind of thing we've got, and whichever kind of practices we use, there is always the fact that it conditions us, that it is what's making the demand on us and calling us. And then I wanted to quote the passage which I couldn't find, but surely somebody knows where it is, where he says we're bethemed. Oh, where? Just open to it. What marvelous luck. I couldn't open to it at all when I was trying this morning. On 181, it's an important thing just to read, because it's neat to what he gets out of it here. On 181, at the second full paragraph, we let the thing be present in its thing from out of the worlding world, then we are thinking of the thing as a thing. Taking thought in this way, we let ourselves be concerned by and then the, never mind being, there's no being in there, the worlding essence of things. I now discovered that every time there is being, it turns out that the translator has translated Wesen, that is essence, that is the way something works, as being. By the way, another one, just so to defend my view that being doesn't show up in here, in the big paragraph at the middle of the next page, in accordance with this ringing thinging itself is unpretentious, and each present thing modestly compliant fits into its own being. That's Wesen again, essence. So here we are. So anyway, we are thinking of the thing as thing. Thinking in this way, we are called by the thing as the thing. There's this calling business. In the strict sense of the German word bedingt, we are bethemed, the conditioned ones. We've left behind us the presumption of unconditionedness. That is, we're no longer subjects dominating objects. We're no longer resources just flexibly adapting to the situation. there is some authority, some directive, something that calls on us to get in tune with it, and that's the sense in which the thing is what conditions us. And that's very important to Heidegger, that there still be something that has authority, something that calls on us, and that that we can take seriously, and gives us some kind of no longer meaningful differences, I think, but centeredness. I'm going to come to that now. I mean, the issue is no longer, it seems to me, the nihilism that comes from no longer having any meaningful differences. That's part of the being story. That's part of the history of the truth of being. That's the story that there were a whole series of meaningful differences when there were artworks working and when there was a God. But there aren't any artworks working anymore. And there isn't a God anymore. There's divinities. So how does anything give us meaningful differences? Well, I'm not sure that anything does. I used to think so. I think we wouldn't have meaningful differences unless we got a new God, which is always something Heidegger thinks would be nice. But on the other hand, what is the question now is something different. We're so dispersed and hassled because we're just resources, are becoming just resources. We need to be centered. We need to have a directive. We need to have something that has authority for us and conditions us. It doesn't give us meaningful differences anymore, I think. It just gives us a sense that there's something that matters and that we are called to conform to it. And that, I think, is enough. I have to find some general statement to make life worth living. You don't have to have meaningful differences to make life worth living, but if you don't have things thinging, then life isn't worth living, because then you just become a flexible resource. Yes?
If divinities are the marginal practices calling us to get in tune with them, why do you say the story of the technicity bridge? Because if it's a marginal practice, I don't understand where the bridge is their kind of understanding.
Okay. The technological practices are not marginal. Good. And therefore, the divinities aren't always hidden because they're marginal practices from some other time. The divinities are whatever it is that gives us a directive, calls us to get in sync with them, and so forth. Right. You're absolutely right. I was unclear about that. Because all the other divinities are hidden and in a reservoir and so forth. Yeah?
And that still doesn't answer the question of how things for the early Greeks,
They would do it in a physis way, and only in a physis way. They didn't have these other practices yet. Well, physis and poiesis seem very twined together. They had nurturing practices and physis practices. That's about all they had. I guess they had already a certain amount of techne and production practices, but they were pretty marginal. I think what you
doesn't seem like the physis is hidden.
Okay, good. Well, that's her question. It doesn't. I mean, that's my fault. I mean, or sort of. I'm trying to say two things at once. I mean, the divinities are mostly absent and hidden because they are practices from other times that have been eclipsed by technicity. But they needn't be hidden that way. I've got two things to say. They could be hidden just because they're so pervasive we haven't noticed them. That seems to be what technicity does. And now he's saying maybe they won't be hidden at all, because in the physis story, there they are. Things are just welling up, and everybody just knows they're welling up. Yeah?
That's being. Isn't that different? I mean, that's the whole artwork story. That's not a thing.
Well, you guys are pushing me into a complicated mess here. I think we were in this once before, and I repressed it. Wait, notice that insofar as physis is both the total understanding of being, and you're getting to the point where it looks like things can't thing in pre-Socratic Greece. That's what you people are batting me into, right? Because it looks like there are no marginal practices to do the divinity job. I'm going to make a big stab, and then I'll let you talk. I mean, insofar as you go back far enough to polytheism, you've got a plurality of divinities that have authority and are pulling you into various situations. But that seems to be But the Fusus story doesn't give you that. Maybe you have to have, when you have the Fusus story, they did also have the polytheism at the same time. Maybe at that point the divinities were the polytheistic divinities, not the fragments of previous understandings of being, which they are now, because now we don't have Aphrodite and Ares, but we have bits of Poesis and Fusus. Getting rather complicated. I'm sorry about this. Yes.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the polytheistic gods, because I was wondering just if maybe instead of modes of revealing, it's just more like moods. Like,
well, it's very much
just,
like moods.
But moods in general, like, it doesn't have to be the overarching mood of revealing, like...
Well, let's sort it out.
Like Aphrodite comes and there's...
Right. Well, that's how it must have been at the Fusus time. And maybe it still is now.
Right.
But now it's particularly important, though, that there be, for instance, a nurturing mood. And it may be that there are some moods which, I'd be happy with this. Some of the moods are old leftover practices that were once total, like nurturing. Comes over you as a mood when you're with your kid or something. And there may be other moods, like friendship, which were never definitive of being. But when you're with your best friend, then that's what you're called to do. Of course, that's a nurturing. Then you cultivate your friendship, as people say. But you could, I guess the erotic one, the Marilyn Monroe one, there's no reason why that mood, which was never an understanding of being, couldn't also call you in, and then a thing with thing as an erotic thing. I think that's right. It's broader, the divinities, than just the endangered species of total practices now in the margin and fragmented. Okay, we got to go on. But all that's been very helpful. I will listen to this tape with great interest the next time I give the course. Okay, but I want to do one more thing, mainly this heavy reading of the building, dwelling, and thinking, because I think it's interesting what you can make of it. I'm afraid in these two essays, we have to put in a lot of phenomena on our own, but I don't think it's just random. I think if Heidegger hadn't written these essays, we wouldn't be pointed toward these phenomena, and once you have these phenomena, you can go back and see what he's sensing in these essays. That's my story, anyway. Okay, now, the nearness question gets to be the question of being at home. That is, remember that what begins the thing essay is we don't have nearness and farness anymore. And what happens is, he doesn't say, let's go back to the good old days where we paid attention to the local issues and never mind worrying about what's going on in China and Yugoslavia, then we have nearness again. He doesn't say that at all. He says we can invent a whole new story about nearness where it isn't a spatial kind of nearness and farness at all. Those who are pulled together in a world, I don't even say local, because it could be on the internet, I think. You could be involved in some maybe game on the internet in which those participating were all gathered together, and maybe, I'm not going to try to do it, the divinities would be there, I'm not sure, I'm very suspicious of whether the divinities are on the internet, but in any case, he does try to do nearness in terms of not a spatial nearness, but what is self-enclosed within the world is near, and what is outside and irrelevant is far. Now, he comes at a new question. There is a lack of being at home. And that's this new question about what are we going to do about the problem of dwelling, of homelessness. And as usual, people think Heidegger's being nostalgic. He looks like, just as it looks like the old stone bridge with the saint on it was what he really liked, and he thinks it's been downhill all the time, and that you would think highway bridges would be the last thing that could think, and not at all. So it looks like he likes the home, and you get this, and there's always this sort of kitschy side of Heidegger, this sort of Black Forest cuckoo clock side, and you get this on 160, where he's going on and on about the wonderful peasant house, where I don't even want to go into it all, except that just he's about fourth line, let us think for a while of the farmhouse in the Black Forest, that's what he is, which is built some 200 years ago for the dwelling of the peasants, and there's the simple oneness and so forth, and it's got death in it, and it's got earth in it, and it's got everything in it. I presume he also thinks it's great that people have lived in it for generations and generations. It's the old homestead where they were born and where they will die, and their children will be born and their children will die. And that's all very nice. And I think Heidegger thinks that it would be great if we could still have that. But we can't have that, and he knows we can't have that. He says that in the next paragraph. Our reference to the Black Forest farm in no way means that we should or could go back to building such houses. Rather, it illustrates by a dwelling that has been how it was able to build. But now we have to find dwelling, however, is the basic character of being in keeping with which mortals exist. By the way, I take it being there, of course never with a capital B anytime, is more like it's got to do with the being of mortals. I mean, it's like in being in time. It's not about the truth of being, that is, the basic character of everything, but it's the kind of being which mortals have and have to be in touch with, I think. In any case, he's not going to tell you a story about how we're going to go back to the old peasant house. He's got to have some story about dwelling, which isn't going to require even, houses, let alone old homesteads. And there's going to be a different meaning of dwelling, presumably, and he doesn't do this, but one could, and I'll just run through it. I was thinking about it. In each of the epochs in the history of being, and there's no reason why there shouldn't be some kind of dwelling in ours too, and there also may be some cross-them-all understanding of being. That's this basic understanding of dwelling. That's the basic character that he wants to get. But, I mean, it's interesting how, for the Greeks, dwelling was really being rooted. How many read the Odyssey? Remember that Odysseus' bed is made out of a tree rooted in the ground in Ithaca. There is really the rootedness of home. That's what you don't get anymore. And the Christians, of course, their ways of dwelling in the world was always passing through. And the subject-object dwelling would be the really solid house that didn't leak and kept you warm and snug. And nowadays, there's the Le Corbusier says that houses and buildings are machines for living. And there you get this sort of, and that would be that they would be flexible, presumably, and technological. But what's important is, to Heidegger, what is it all these modes of dwelling would have in common? And that's what he's talking about in this essay, though he's talking about it in the most roundabout way. But he says on the two-thirds down on 161, the real dwelling plight, he says it's certainly not a problem I mean, he worries about the fact that there are not enough houses and so forth, but the real dwelling plight lies in this, that mortals ever search anew for the nature of dwelling, that they must ever learn to dwell. What if man's homelessness consisted in this, that man still does not even think of the real plight of dwelling as the plight? Okay, and then what is then the real problem, and what is the real solution to this homelessness or rootlessness or dispersedness of the current, never mind dispersedness, that's more the theme essay, and that's the focal practice story. This is not going to be a focal practice story, but we want to know what is the answer to rootedness, what gives us a sense of, and this is the clue, I think. The real question is, what gives us a sense of being at home? Now, this gets a little confused, not by anybody's fault, but he starts out by saying that the driver's at home in the truck and the power plant, the guy's at home in the power plant. There he just means that, and I don't know, I bet the German is different than the English. That is, that's where he's at work. I don't think that it has the sense of at home that we have. I think that he wants to say that what replaces rootedness is whatever it is that's being at home, just like he's going to replace spatial nearness and local nearness with whatever it is that happens when a world whirls. And so you find little pieces of this. So remember, I wanted to tell you, I kept promising that dwelling has got to do with being centered and at peace in the job of preserving, he says on 149. and about a third of the way down. To dwell, to be set at peace, means to remain at peace within the free, the preserved, the free sphere that safeguards each thing in its nature. Then the fundamental character of dwelling is this sparing and preserving. It's all got to do with this some kind of nurturing. It pervades dwelling in its whole range. And what do I think? Well, what does that seem to be? Well, I think it's something like what it would be like to feel at home, or sort of make yourself at home, where making yourself at home means cultivating the sort of practices that enable you to have a familiarity so that you pervade, in his language, the whole situation from a center. I mean, all this sounds very strange and abstract, and it is, and I don't even know if I can make it work. But he's got this business of pervading. I mean, there are all these little pieces scattered around, which I'm trying to put together. So he talks about how on 157, and at the bottom of the long paragraph, when I go towards the door of the lecture hall, I'm already there, and I could not go to it at all if I were not such that I am there. I'm never here only in this encapsulated body, rather I am there. That is, I already pervade the room, and only thus can I go through it. Well, what is it to pervade the room? I think it's to have the skill for dealing with the stuff in the room. This is something that's in being and time. There he calls it familiarity. And being able to get into a relation of something so that you are familiar with it and at home in it, I think is what it is to dwell in. No, there's more to dwell. That's what it is. That's what you cultivate, I think. That's really what building is all about. Building is, I think, cultivating the kind of familiarity that enables you to pervade a space, which means to be at home in it. And now let's see if I can find more. So, but that that means that, I think, it's tied up in a way that I'm not too clear about, I'm afraid. That sense of pervading and familiarity is tied up with cultivating practices that make it possible for things to think. Now, these two things are related in ways that I don't even have a page number. Did I make that up? Where is it? Well, it's got to do with the bridge. And yeah, for instance, here's the last sentence in the second paragraph on 159, which says, for building brings the fourfold hither into the thing, the bridge, and brings forth the thing as a location, out into what is already there, room for which is only now made by this location. Well, it's all about sort of having a place, having a location. It's not, I'm trying to distinguish it from the gathering of the fourfold. I mean, they're both gatherings of the fourfold, but in the thing essay, I guess here's the best I can do. In the thing essay, the emphasis is on the focal practice, the way it draws together the earth, the sky, the mortals, and the divinities. And in this essay, the emphasis is on how you feel at home in it, how it's familiar to you and you pervade it, and it gives you a sense of being centered and at peace. Did I ever read the centered and at peace? I forget. Actually, I was about to. Didn't I do it? I'll go look. I started to, but I don't see now that I did, but I don't see now where it is either. I said it was on 149. To dwell is to set at peace, or at peace within the free. Yes, I did read that. Okay, that's what I think. So I think they're just two aspects of the same thing that he's getting at. And I only need one more thing now, which I mentioned last time, but which I'll say again, is, well, if that's building, if building is cultivating the practices by which you can let things thing, which give you then a sense of familiarity and being at home and centeredness, even if it's not the old homestead, even if it's not even a house, then the final thing you want to put in here is, and this could become so customary that it was just the taken for granted background of your life, where you were dwelling in a whole bunch of familiar things which you had cultivated the practices to make a thing for you. The gardening and the eating and the driving on the highway and all of that. Then I think that would be dwelling, because dwelling has to do with what becomes customary. It's gewohnt, it's habitual. To dwell on earth, if we could do it, would be able to just habitually feel at home in the centered worlds that we had cultivated the practices to produce. I don't find all this about as much fun as the highway bridge, and I don't find as much text to back it up, when that was already pretty minimal. But I had to say this because we read this essay and I had to get something out of it. And that's what I managed to get out of it when I reread it. See, I'm trying to make sense of the end of the one before the last paragraph. As soon as man gives thought to his homelessness, he is in misery no longer. Rightly considered and kept well in mind, it is the sole summons that calls mortals into their dwelling. What can that mean? Well, once we become aware that we won't have any home unless we are able to respond to and appreciate what is familiar and are attentive to things singing, then we'll see that we're already at home, because we can all that's something available to us. There's no housing shortage. The fact that we are not rooted anymore, the fact that there's no old homesteads around anymore, doesn't matter. Once we see that what we really need is this ability to be focused and centered and have a world, we will see, I take it, that we're already dwelling, or that we could be already dwelling, and maybe not that we are already dwelling. We're summoned into dwelling. I'll repeat, that is, we're summoned into appreciating the familiar and being attentive and cultivating things. It's a funny way to do it. I want to stop with, I don't want to go on with this, and I don't even want to discuss it. I feel that I can't do it. I have not done it justice. I don't know how to get anything more out of it. Let's go to something more fun. Okay, I think before we stop, with the next 10 minutes, we must discuss the relation of things thinking to works of art working. That's interesting and serious. Because I used to think that things thinking were just mini works of art working. And in some way they are. But there are also some very important differences. And so let's go through them. Here's what they have in common. And there are important things they have in common. They gather. In the case of works of art, they gather the whole culture. In the case of things thinking, they gather some people for some time. But in both cases, gathering is a big part of it. They both have earth and sky functions. But that's the similarity. Maybe I'll say the differences. They have earth and sky functions. It's earth and world, it's called in the work of art, but it's not really. I mean, it's the same thing. They have the hidden and the manifest aspects. When they're working, when works of art are working and things are thinging, Heidegger describes them as shining. That is, that we see things in the light of them. And in both cases, the way he describes it, they open up a world. They disclose. And one is the big historical world of a historical people, and one is the world of dinner while it's happening. And in both cases, they make us aware when it's all working best that we're needed as preservers. And it's our job. The creators need the preservers, as he says about the works of art. And certainly we have to cultivate the things singing. Now, here are the differences that are important. And then they're so obvious, and we've sort of touched on them many times. The work of art is one big deal, pretentious thing. It lights up all of being. It establishes truth. It gives a style for a whole historical world. Whereas the thinking is not a pretentious, it's humble. It only lights up I keep wanting to say local world, but that's not right because it sounds too spatial. A nearness, and it only lights up a nearness for a while. And then the other important difference, which is related, if you can see how, is that, and this is one of the striking differences, that there's a struggle between, I'm going to call it earth and sky, even though it says earth and world, just so you can see the parallel. Now, Forrest doesn't like that. Okay. There's a struggle between earth and world in the work of art, where earth is the concealing and world is the out in the open manifest. And there's a parallel concealed and manifest in the thinking, but there's not a struggle. There's a marriage. They are just happily together. And now, why is that? Well, that's because the artwork is trying, so to speak, to cover everything, to gather in all paths of destiny, to bring everything into that one style. So it's going to come up against the resistance, all sorts of resistance, namely the reservoir of other possible styles, the material which is never going to be fully brought under any given style, and so forth. But the thinking isn't trying to make itself universal. It isn't trying to set up a style. It isn't gathering in all the paths. So when it comes up with what can't be brought into manifestness, like the sensuous side and the body side in the dinner, it'll be different in different things thinking. When it comes up against the limits to what is clear, it just happily connects with the limits to what is clear. It isn't in the job of making everything clear, bringing everything under one style, getting a universal truth of being. And now, interestingly enough, and this is something I only figured out today, there's no talk of mortals. I mean, it hits you in the face. At least I don't remember any talk of mortals for the work of art. Are there mortals? Yeah, well, that's one of the meaningful differences. But that mortals are one of the functions in it, so to speak, along with earth and sky. There are two things. I'll make my pitch. There are no divinities and no mortals. And now I think that's just as it should be. At least it fits my story. I mean, if mortals are able to have lots of different identities, if that's what it is to be a mortal, you don't want one, because it gives you the identity, the work of art, as an Athenian or as a nurturer or whatever. It tells you what human beings are and what you are insofar as you're a Christian or you're a Greek or you're a modern. It tells you you're a subject. So it seems to me it wouldn't have mortals in the sense of people who realize they could be in various worlds and have various identities, because it's telling you can only be in one world and in a certain sense have the identity that kind of world gives people. And of course, it also hits you in the face, but it took me a while to notice it, that you have a God in the temple, not divinities. But of course that follows too. It's going to be one God that's going to give you the center for one world. Whereas if there's a poly thing going on, where there are lots of things thinking, then there's going to be lots of different divinities coming out in different cases of things thinking. So those are the big differences. Now, yeah. Oh, good.
Artworks created.
That's true. That's right, and it's probably important, but I don't know how to do with it. It's true that artworks are created in a way that things aren't.
And created meaning that they are not, they don't use up the earthly element. But if a jug is a thing, and a jug looks like it is thinging, it's also serving, and it's not simply created as a created work. It's equipment.
Yeah, you'll have to tell me more. We'll have to talk about it in office hours. It's a difference, all right, but I don't know what to do with it. And because particularly since created is played way down, and the creators are, after all, what's really doing the thing is, he says, art. The creators are being receptive to art, and they're sort of channels, the way that when somebody's making a chalice, which is a kind of thing, the maker is a kind of channel. And therefore, I'm not... But it's true that somehow when a thing thinks, there's no one person or anything that's the... Well, there needn't be one person who creates the temple either. Who knows who creates the temple? People.
Deer and row.
They don't have creators at all. Well, what you need is cultivators. Take the preservers. They're preservers but not creators, you're saying, right? There have to be cultivators. Deer and row don't just go around thinking if there aren't any people. If the human race got wiped out, they wouldn't think anymore. That's clear. Okay, so there is some special thing about creators, but I don't know what it is. Am I about to run out of time? Well, I think I may have 1 minute. Let's try. I want to say one more thing, and it should have been said slowly, but I'm now going to have to say it fast. But it's very moving to me, and I think I may have said it already. Have I told you about how Heidegger switches from why he switches his preference from the artwork to the thing? That is, having talked about the truth of being most of his life, you can't tell, but believe me, we're coming in only on the end of things when we talk about the thing. And having said great thinkers only have one thought, and his thought was the ontological difference, the difference between being, big deal being, and the beings that show up in a given where there is big deal being. He comes around at the end to think that maybe he shouldn't have been doing that, that what's more important is to think about things thinking. In his last seminar, Time and Being, which we were going to read, but only for this sentence, he says, let's see, he wants to talk about appropriation. That is this very special thing of how all these practices gather to bring things out in their own. And there are two kinds of appropriation. Works of art gather to bring the whole culture out in its own, and things thinking gather to bring these nearness worlds in their own. He says, from the perspective of appropriation, it becomes necessary to free thinking from the ontological difference. From the perspective on appropriation, this relation shows itself in the relation of world and thing, a relation which could in a way be understood as the relation of being and beings, but then its peculiar quality would be lost. I take that, what that means is that it's more important, given the fact that we're probably not going to get a new God, and that we've got to live lives that are worth living, and he's got to have some way to do it, that he's going to think about thing and world. That's what you ought to be thinking about. And that if you think about thing and world in terms of being and beings, you will sort of subsume the thing and world into whatever current mode of revealing there is. So you think of a thing as a technological thing, you could put the emphasis on the fact that what's really going on is technicity. But you don't want to do that. You want to think about it instead as this individual entity, which for a while makes a world, and then gives people a center, and gives people a directive, gives people an authority, gets people in a tune with it, and thereby makes their life worth living and saves them from being resources. And it's that that's more important than the big deal distinction between being and beings. That is, and it's amazing that somebody would be so flexible in their old age to give up the thought, which they said in their middle age was every thinker has only one thought, Heidegger said, and mine is the ontological difference. By the time he's hoping that a new God will come along and save us, even in the technology essay. But in the last seminar, he finally says, no, I think that the thing we should be really caring about is thing and world. So that's why we've been caring about thing and world. And now we're going to stop caring about thing and world. We're going to go on to language.